and had something to bite. So we'd like to start the session immediately after this. And this session will be looking at the effective use and governance of AI in modern Africa. Um, and I would like to invite the panelists to the stage. I'd like to invite Bobina Zulfa from Pollicy. I'd like to invite Adrian Wanyama from CIPESA. I'd like to invite Zara from Research ICT Africa. Colleagues, if you could kindly just move to the front and occupy the seats at the front, that would be very much appreciated. And those who are still outside having their break, we really look forward to having you inside the room. We have a few minutes for this panel session. It's the one just before lunch, so we'll try to be brief but concise. And we also ask the tech team if they can provide sound to all the microphones, please. If the tech team could kindly provide quality sound to the panelists, that would be very much appreciated. The session title is Towards Effective Use and Governance of AI in Modern Africa. And the panelists for these sessions will be speaking on the different contexts in which AI has been used or is being used in Africa, ranging from elections in West Africa and looking at AI and gender issues, and also how civil society organizations are mitigating risks of AI in their day-to-day work. And the idea for the session is to increase awareness of AI potential in transforming socioeconomic and political development in the context, stronger collaborations and alliances among digital actors, human rights defenders, academia and the tech sector in AI, and practical recommendations for ethical application of AI in elections, academics, gender advocates, and research. We will be starting with our team from Pollicy, and I'll ask the panelists to also introduce themselves and what they do and the organizations, even as they speak on the issues. And we'll have 10 minutes for each of the panelists and reserve about 20 minutes for Q&A. If you'll allow me, I'll just take a seat at the end and have Bobina start by introducing herself.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Like Sarah said, I'm called Bobina Zulfa, and I'm a data and digital rights researcher with Pollicy. Pollicy is a feminist civ tech organization. We're based in Kampala, Uganda, headquartered, but we work across the continent. Our work looks at how, technologies can be adopted, integrated within the African context, really for, I think, much of what she was saying, for socioeconomic development, etc. That's a little bit about me, and I think I'll pass this over to Adrian. Am I supposed to?
So over to you, Bobina. What approaches and narratives are framing AI governance landscape in Africa, and how are these impacting AI policy making? And is that inclusive in the context of Africa?
Right. Thank you for the question. I think I want to start from the bit of the narratives. The conversation that was happening here earlier, I think, it came up, what other things we should prioritize when we're looking at AI governance, what should we concern ourselves with, etc., as the continent. And I've been thinking it's interesting to look at the narratives that are shaping AI governance or policy making broadly in Africa. Why? Because narratives typically, are these sort of lens through which, the discourse that we are having across a number of issues is enabled. So we have emerging and existing narratives on AI governance in Africa. And I wanted to touch on particularly, I think, one or two. I want to talk about this narrative of AI development. So I think in the policy making landscape in Africa, looking at AI have sort of, we've shaped the narrative. I mean, we've shaped the conversation of AI governance in Africa through the development lens, right? That AI is coming in to enable development. But I don't think we do enough to unpack what that really means or what that entails as a whole, which is the approaches and narratives that I want to talk about briefly. So AI for development, I think as a goal in and of itself is something that it's relevant. It fits within our development agenda as Africa. But beyond, what this sort of predicates in terms of, what are AI systems going to do in terms of the transformational system that we're going to adopt for different socioeconomic issues on the continent, or, how this access to massive data can be used, for analytical insights around our development problems again. I think beyond that, there is something else that meets the eye. That for policy making, we talk about how, AI is, we make it seem like the integration of AI within our ecosystems immediately predicates or immediately, like there is a direct link to development, but it isn't so clear how that exactly is going to happen. And so in that sense, it sort of brings upon us, it brings a sort of tech deterministic approach on us as a continent, that we don't even question the processes of integrating AI within our context, because we've already said it's for development, and development is, of course, this relevant and noble agenda for us as a continent. So I think my commentary there is on this tech determinism. What it does for us as a continent is it takes away from the democratic process that is supposed to go in our integration of AI, that the people, and I think a lot of the people who have been here on this stage earlier have been talking to this, that how are people involved in shaping the uptake of these technologies in our context, right? Because if you're just saying as government, as, all these bodies that are sort of leading on this conversation of AI for development, that, this is sort of what we're looking at. Are people a part of shaping what is coming out of it? Maybe let me bring the conversation closer with a couple of examples around this a bit of the fallacy with this AI for development narrative. We hear, for instance, about this democratization of technology in Africa, of AI technologies particularly. But I think, look at the landscape of what we're calling democratization of AI in Africa. It paints an interesting picture. A lot of what we're having, because democratization means, we have, that there are these technologies that we sort of have open access to, but it's typically, a lot of it is generative AI. When you look at the broader tech landscape, we don't have access to very critical technologies for things like health, and for things like minerals and energy, etc. So the tech transfer landscape in Africa actually tells a different story on what this democratized access means in the global landscape that we're in as Africa. And so then the imperative is on policy making across the continent to question, when we're framing these narratives of development. Again, how are people shaping the agenda? How are people involved in, in shaping the processes and etc. And so I think besides that tech transfer example, I also want to talk about sort of this conversation on the youth demographic, and how I think we talk about the opportunities for the demographic dividend, etc. Again, this conversation is very much shaped from this perspective of the markets, right? That we have these young people that can serve the labor, the markets. But if you're looking at the way integration of AI is happening right now, what are young people typically doing? Is it meaningful integration of AI within our ecosystem as Africa? And I think here also a big issue is what we're seeing is in not being critical of the technologies that are trickling down here. For instance, we're saying, we're talking about this democratization, and it's mostly generative AI and etc. If we're seeing that a lot of what is coming down is actually making more harm than good, then we have to rethink this sort of illusion of benevolence that we've placed on these technologies upon ourselves, and that policy making has to be the one that leads this conversation. And in that sense, the conversation goes beyond that development aspect of only looking at the economic, but that there is a political conversation to be had, a power conversation to be had in how we shape our tech, our AI agenda for the continent, for the people. So yeah, I think for me that's one. And maybe to the idea of the approaches, I'll bring it a bit closer to more concrete. I think the lens through which policy making is talking about some of these things. The idea of tech sovereignty. It's very interesting to me that we find that in I think a lot of discourse in the policy making circles and etc., there is a bit of a questioning of even the relevance of tech sovereignty for us as Africa, which is very interesting because every other region, like tech sovereignty is top of the agenda. But I think for us as African, I think it comes, of course, from sort of like this history of where we are today, our technological history and etc., is that when we haven't led so much on shaping our agenda, our research agenda, our scientific agenda. And so in that imposition, no wonder it feels like why should sovereignty be something that we value? And I'm not saying that we don't. All our high level principles, whether it's in the AI strategy or the AUDP, the data policy framework, etc., I think they talk about sovereignty, but sovereignty is very much looked at from the aspects of, data flows and, should we localize etc. But that there is a political conversation to be had on sovereignty, on shaping our scientific agenda as a continent. That in talking about the integration of AI, that these systems that are meant to, benefit the broader communities outside of the few people who are already engaged in this, that there is actually greater value for the greater population as opposed to just a few players. And so, yeah, that's my commentary, I think, on what I don't see us talking enough about, that we have to talk about how this AI for development is going to be reached and how, and that the people have to be at the center of that. And we typically don't define how that should happen. And I think this is how we get to define it, in the actors, in the how, in the why. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobina, for that commentary. And I think what you mentioned about involving the people in the conversation, Adrian will speak a little to that during his session, but I'd like us to move to Zara. You have been working a lot on how AI is shaping elections in West Africa, especially ensuring information integrity, and with the current issues of misinformation and disinformation. Maybe we can hear more about what Research ICT Africa is doing in that aspect. And given the complex digital landscape in West Africa, how can policymakers develop and implement effective information integrity governance frameworks?
Thank you, Zara. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zara Schroeder. I am a researcher at Research ICT Africa. Research ICT Africa is a think tank based in Cape Town, South Africa. We work on the regulation, governance of digital technologies and also digital policy. I would like to begin by thanking CIPESA for organizing this forum and for having me here today. It is a pleasure to be sharing the work that we are doing at Research ICT Africa on information integrity. And as I mentioned today, I will be discussing or addressing a critical issue, the digital transformation in West Africa and how the rise of AI technologies are reshaping information integrity landscape, and especially around the time and period of elections. So, as discussed in the sessions earlier this morning, we are witnessing significant shifts with regards to artificial intelligence. But not only that, especially in terms of increasing internet access, growing mobile phone penetration, and widespread use of social media and messaging apps. And according to the work that we're doing at Research ICT Africa, these changes are accelerating digital engagement across the region, not only in West Africa. And with these developments, there are new risks that are emerging. The work that I will be speaking about today is based on a project that is funded by UNESCO, where my colleague, Dr. Scott Timke, and I served as technical advisors. We explored how the proliferation of digital misinformation and disinformation in West Africa presents challenges to regional stability, democratic processes, and social cohesion. The digital landscape across the region's 15 states exhibits varying levels of development and also faces unique challenges in maintaining information integrity. This evaluation focuses on developing a model policy framework aligned to UNESCO's guidelines that can address these challenges while promoting responsible digital governance as well as social cohesion. The specific policy brief that I will be referring to today is titled Policy Approaches to Information Integrity in West Africa. It's informed by research that we had done for UNESCO as technical advisors. Please do visit our website and check out the policy brief. And just to, I think, unpack what AI is doing to election periods in West Africa. I think that we know that elections serve as high-stakes moments, not only in West African regions, but across the globe. And they tend to heighten political polarization, amplify rumor mills, and also raise the risk of unrest. Now, add to that the rising capabilities of AI, especially in terms of the era that we are in right now with generative AI and how it is contributing to the production of synthetic media, bots, and also manipulated content. And with all of that, we tend to have a volatile mix. That's why information integrity matters more now than ever before. It underpins trust in institutions, supports peaceful transitions of power, and also enables citizens to make informed choices. When we consider how AI is reshaping the information ecosystem, we can break it down into three key strands, which is disinformation and misinformation, deepfakes and synthetic media, and also public distrust and the erosion of credibility. I would like us to briefly look at each of them. In terms of dis and misinformation, we know that AI enables false information to spread at scale and at speed. It can automate the creation of misleading posts, power coordinated bot campaigns, and also overwhelm social media feeds. We know that during this era that the spread of disinformation is largely due to social media platforms, and that is where a majority of the population are consuming the information. And we see this increasingly with the youth population especially. Research ICT Africa highlights how digital misinformation is proliferating, yet oversight and regulation have not kept pace. There are serious gaps in platform governance, in content moderation, transparency, and also in accountability, especially during the periods of elections. When we look at deepfakes and synthetic media, AI now makes it easy to manipulate audio and video content in convincing ways. We've seen tools that clone voices, generate fake images, and also alter speech content in real time. These capabilities are being weaponized, especially during election periods. When we look at the research that we had done last year under another project in terms of looking at the impacts of mis and disinformation with the implementation of generative AI and social media platforms, we interviewed South African women to explore the experiences and perception of the introduction of generative AI in social media platforms. And we found that women were experiencing enhanced instances of harassment, non-consensual sexual image sharing, the creation of synthetic media through deepfakes. And this was impacting them, especially during periods of election where they were being targeted. And this is across women being targeted through all sectors. But if we look at women who are targeted, especially in sectors such as politics and journalism, through these AI tools, we see that it is exacerbating existing gendered inequalities. It is further enhancing the proliferation of online gender-based violence, and it is essentially contributing to the erosion of information integrity in online spaces. When we consider public distrust and digital literacy gaps, we know that when disinformation goes unchecked, trust in the media and democratic institutions erodes. Many citizens do not know how to verify digital content, and often that deepfakes even exist. Low digital and media literacy, especially in rural areas, makes the public more vulnerable. And this is what we have found in the research research that we have done in the West African countries. When we look at a gendered lens on disinformation across the board, women, whether they are journalists, candidates, or activists, are disproportionately targeted. They face gender disinformation, attacks on their morality, appearance, or competence. This isn't just about reputational harm. It silences women, it discourages them from participating in civic life, and it essentially undermines democracy. When we look at the key findings and gaps that we identified in the research that we had done for the West African project, we find that while there are international frameworks like UNESCO's guidelines, many West African countries still lack strong national frameworks to combat this. Some key gaps include weak accountability from platforms during critical periods like elections, limited technical capacity to even detect deepfakes and synthetic content, and also deep digital divides, as mentioned, in terms of urban versus rural, and the gender divides in terms of men versus women. And then lastly, fragmented governance. There's often overlapping mandates which result in conflicting laws. The paper promises minimum requirements. We advocate for the transparency from platforms, obligations during election periods, and also better coordination among governments, civil society, and platforms, thus enhancing a multi-stakeholder approach. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Zara, for that. And your presentation speaks a little bit to a research that we have done at Thomson Reuters in conjunction with Article 19, looking at how generative AI impacts freedom of expression and how African countries are more and more relying on cybersecurity laws to limit sort of spread of misinformation online, but in essence also curtailing the freedom of expression. I think also it's important to also see how what you have done in West Africa is applicable to other countries in Africa that are either in the election period or about to have elections. I know there's Uganda and Kenya, we are almost on the same route. And I see we do have members of parliament present from different countries, not to put you on the spot, but this is something very integral as we go into the election period. What are governments doing to safeguard freedom of expression for the citizens, but also safeguarding information integrity and platform accountability? We will get to that during the Q&A session. Very curious to hear what participants have to say from the different contexts. But let me move to Adrian from CIPESA. Adrian, CIPESA has been very vocal in bringing together civil society organizations to this discourse on AI governance. And at some point this year, you started doing a research on an AI policy template for civil society organizations, especially those that are in countries that already have national policies and strategies or are anticipating such policies and strategies. What are some of the potential benefits of AI for civil society's work and operations? And how can we ensure meaningful participation of AI, of African persons in the AI development and governance? Just picking up from where Bobina left on inclusivity.
Thank you very much, Sarah. As she's mentioned, my name is Adrian Wanyama. I'm Program Manager Legal at CIPESA. CIPESA, as all of you have heard, it's partly why we are here. So I'll not go into that. Let me start by briefly speaking about civil society. When you speak about civil society is not exclusively for non-governmental organizations. Civil society can be expanded to include the media, you, the citizens, partly the private sector, the academia, and other players, including human rights defenders and other small startups, community-based organizations, and so on and so forth. At CIPESA, as one of the first initiatives that we noted that needed to intervene in the current developments of AI and the application of AI by the different civil society organizations I've just mentioned, we set out to try as much as possible to so we can develop a model policy on artificial intelligence for CSOs or for civil society organizations. And this policy is not supposed to be imposed on organizations, but it is one that can be adapted and modified to suit the needs of a specific or a given civil society organization, such that they can apply AI within the parameters that are acceptable, within parameters that are professional, within parameters that are considered to be standardized, within parameters that are not looked at as rather infringing on rights of others or eroding certain specific aspects and ethics of the different civil society sector players. In terms of the benefits that I can speak to, AI provides a lot of potential, as has been highlighted here. For all the CSOs that I've mentioned, all the civil society sector that I've mentioned, the first thing is the potential for CSOs to work more efficiently and more effectively in their work using artificial intelligence. That is not in doubt, because most of you here, when they give you a topic to speak about at a conference or at a seminar, the first thing you'll do is to run to artificial intelligence and patch it in there, and then you'll get answers very fast. And then you appear to be an expert when you speak at the panel. That is what AI is doing. That is for civil society. Secondly, artificial intelligence has the potential to help us to organize a lot of information from different sources, especially those that are found on the internet. The internet, briefly defined, is the interconnectedness of computers, which are connected to different servers across the globe. So you just punch in what you want, and what will happen is that AI specifically or specially designed systems, bots, will run to each and every server that is around, collect for you information, and bring it for you in a trick of an eye or in just seconds. So we are able to have very organized content and information for us to use. But also those of you who write proposals, I know AI is supporting you in fundraising and doing all sorts of work using artificial intelligence. Because they have highlighted quite a number of benefits, I want to briefly highlight some of the potential risks that AI poses, even though they were highlighted much earlier. To civil society organizations, to media, it runs the risk of eroding critical thinking of individuals in their work or in their daily work. To the media, it's come out outrightly that AI is eroding, for example, journalist ethics and professional codes of conduct. People are able to reproduce content and publish it the way they want, and even put their names confidently written by, and they put the name of a journalist, yet they put almost no effort in it. But also AI is associated with taking away employment opportunities of individuals, as you may have known, because AI provides the potential to perform multiple tasks using a single machine, as opposed to employing 10 members of staff. So instead of employing 10 people, you can deploy artificial intelligence and it will do for you work for even 100 people. So do you need employees anyway? So others will lose their jobs. In the media, people are losing jobs. In civil society organizations, people are losing jobs. So it is a common trend that is what AI is posing. So those are some of the potential risks. But what are the challenges that we face? Some of the challenges arise from what has been discussed. The policy and regulatory gaps that we have are really eating us up, because now people use AI the way they want, because there's no clear law or no clear policy. Students are plagiarizing work and they think they'll go with it. One of the biggest risks which my colleague from Research ICT Africa has just highlighted. Some of the things you'll see even in the report, the impact of AI on the digital democracy in Africa. Some of the key risks that you're going to find in the report arise from what we've considered to be disinformation and misinformation. How are they risks? It is because disinformation is the circulation of content which you know will cause some form of harm on individuals, but you do not care anyway. You want them to suffer the harm. You circulate the content. Misinformation, you do not know whether it will cause any harm or not, for you just send the information, which is synonymous with most of you here. How disinformation is a problem is that most of the governments across the continent have decided to narrow the space within which civil society actors operate, because they're using disinformation and misinformation as a justification to come up with regressive laws and policies to check on what people are sharing, on what people are discussing in the name of disinformation, misinformation. They're spreading hate speech. That's a big, big, big challenge, and it is sweeping across the entire continent. But then, of course, also your integrity is at stake. The integrity of politicians is at stake. With the invention of what we call deep fakes, people are able to do more using AI than they would do previously. So you pick somebody's video. I think it has come up in most of the countries. You pick a video and use somebody's voice, somebody's picture, and no one will doubt. Everybody will consider it to be indeed that person. Yet it's not the case. Deepfakes with disinformation added to them. The lawyers in the house, I'm also a lawyer, but our friends in Kenya, there's a lawyer who was being penalized for quoting wrong decisions, non-existent cases or decisions that have been made by courts which don't exist, simply because they went to AI and put in something and AI gave them a response. AI has the capacity, for those of you who use it, be very cautious. It even has the capacity to tell you this reference is prospective. For example, if you're asking about digital democracy, it will give you a citation which it is prospecting that CIPESA will produce a similar report in 2026. And it will put there a warning. This citation is prospective based on the fact that CIPESA might produce a similar report in the next year. So as you try to employ the usage of AI, please beware that you run that risk of producing fake and false content. So we want to invite all of you, when this policy is out, I think we are working hand in hand with Thomson Reuters, where Zara comes from, and our biggest aim is to try as much as possible to ensure that civil society, the media, and all other players, human rights defenders, online activists, journalists, and media houses, that in the application of artificial intelligence in their work, that application is done so in an ethical and professional manner, without eroding integrity, without eroding professional ethics, without eroding the standards that have been laid down in our regional and international instruments and policy frameworks that speak to responsible use of AI, that speak to AI governance that is progressive for socio-economic transformation on the continent. Yeah, I think I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so
Back
much,
to you.
Edwin. Thank you. You mentioned something on AI for journalism, and a few days ago we had a discussion in Nairobi, and it so happened that a leading newsroom did an audit on their freelance journalists who usually offer opinion pieces, and a number of them were actually non-existent. They were AI bots. And because of that, we were challenged to start a training on AI for journalism. It's a program that we're doing at Thomson Reuters on AI adoption for newsrooms. And I'm also aware that CIPESA is doing a similar thing on AI training for newsrooms and journalists. So it's actually an important aspect of journalists' work, and also the audits that they have to do and the policies that they have to put in place in ensuring that there is ethical and governance rights use of AI in the newsrooms. So our panel session was that brief and very interesting and concise. We've heard from Bobina on the narratives that we are avoiding on AI for development. We've had a very interesting discussion from Zara on Research ICT Africa on the research that they have done on the use of AI in West Africa, looking at misinformation, disinformation, and safeguarding information integrity. And Adrian has spoken about AI for civil society organizations and the AI policy that is being developed, which we hope it will be ready soon, Adrian, probably. We don't want to make commitments, but very soon we will have that template which we can work with civil society organizations to adopt in their different work streams. So I will open this up for discussion, and we have several hands up. I don't know whether we have someone to help us pass over the mic. Okay, we can start.
I have someone take the mic.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe if you can specify who you want your question to go to, that would be very helpful.
Okay, I was going to do the selfish thing of asking the whole panel, but I'll first introduce myself. So thank you so much for... Hi, thank you so much for the conversation. My name is Chennai Che, the director of Masakane African Languages Hub. So I did want to give a comment slightly on thinking about community involvement. And so the work that Masakane has done over the last 5 years has always been involving community, particularly in developing data sets around language preservation. So I think that may be a good space to also unpack how communities involved and some of the issues that need to be taken account in terms of mobilizing people to actually have ownership around AI and the data created. So I think that was specifically for Bobina, but as a question maybe to go to the last speaker and to Zara, I am curious, how have African technical developers actually responded to regulation? Because I think sometimes the conversation does seem to focus more on big tech, but we also know the motivation, particularly for the young population we have on the African continent, is to develop AI or is to develop new digital technologies. So I am curious to see or to hear from you, what have the responses been? Are they also participating in these processes as well? Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panel. My name is Sheena. I work at the Association for Progressive Communications. My question is to the panel in general, but I think I am responding to my brother who spoke from CIPESA. So when we're looking at AI, and in particular generative AI, we know that a lot of the information comes from the internet, as well as other, I guess, validated data sets. But my provocation to the panel and to the room is recognizing that, for example, only 2.5% of African languages are represented on the internet. Africa only produces maybe 18% of data and research that is published online, maybe even less. Right. So we are building this technology on a platform that has us underrepresented, misrepresented, and basically excluded as far as access goes. So I'm trying to understand how we can benefit from something that inherently excludes us. Thank you.
So, thank you. My name is Adedeji Adeniro. I work for Center for Study of Economics of Africa. We're based in Abuja. My question is actually to Bobina, the first speakers, and you push back on the narrative of AI for development for the continent. So my question is, if that shouldn't be our priority, what should it be? Considering the fact that when we look at AI space, it's uncertain. So how do you govern uncertainty? And the only thing I think is certain in that pathway is development. I mean, that's what the end goal is all about. Of course, there are many kind of things you want to achieve or add to development, but the development is the key goals, and other things need to be added. If we are not certain about how these other things, but we're certain about what the end goal is, so why should we prioritize other things and not really also frame it as a development as other part of the world region has been? But secondly, look at what the entry point of AI into the continent has been too. Most of the entry point has been not as a new technology, but as amplification of our existing, whether you are using existing tools, AI makes you better in what you're doing. So if that's the case, again, why can't Africa, that has actually been lagging behind, really see this as opportunities and really go in as a kind of something to really that we need to prioritize rather than deprioritize? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My colleague members of Parliament and all the civil society organizations and sponsors. My name is Dr. Byaktonda Abdu. I'm a member of Parliament in Uganda. And I'm also, in the parliamentary language, we say I'm sponsoring a bill on artificial intelligence. And it's in advanced stages. However, I would like to, this is a very important topic, what is the effective use of artificial intelligence in Africa. And I want to thank the panelists for unpacking quite a number of things, especially where governments in Africa have looked at the regressive legislation, which curtail the use of artificial intelligence. And I would like to mention that I think in management, we say you cannot trade in what you cannot measure. First of all, in my expectation, I wanted to know on the African continent how many economies have come up with either policy or some basic regulation on artificial intelligence. I think that is very important as you carry out with your research. But what I must mention is that every economy needs a regulation and adoption and management of artificial intelligence. Because one, it is cutting across all the basic issues. For example, when you talk of health, we are using IAF diagnose. When you talk of defense, IAA is using to make ammunition and all those other strategies. When you talk of education, and recently, I think as I was researching, I found out that I think in some economies, it is associated loss of jobs like he mentioned. In some elderly homes, I think you find that the nurses are falling out and health workers, and they are deploying artificial intelligence. So basically now, the issues to resolve on provision of administration, management, and development, and what are the ESCO standards for safe and responsible use of artificial intelligence. The other question should be, how do we regulate data ownership, security and sharing, encouraging innovation and capacity building, like some of you mentioned. I think that's very crucial when in the course of developing artificial intelligence. The other one, I think, as I conclude, of course, the other one should be focus on how do we address disruption caused by IA and promoting restriction, and then aligning IA governance with the global standards. I think you find that in the European economy, I think there are standards, and IA is quite prominent in most of these economies. And then the other one is creating awareness. I think that one was mentioned. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is where, when you allude to this, you'd even support the parliaments in Africa really come up with informed decisions and ensure that at least we're in tandem with the rest of the globe. I thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Zara Pendi, and I chair the Parliamentary Forum on Internet Governance in Uganda. And this morning we heard about the train that is moving. I just want to state that we are hearing conflicting statements from you, the experts. Some are saying we don't need a law now. Let us focus on infrastructure, building capacity, and all that. But I want to say this as the people's representative, that specifically speaking about Africa, we have a huge youth population. And if we are not careful with this artificial intelligence, I'm glad some of the panelists have acknowledged the risks that will be associated with this artificial intelligence. And I just want to call upon you, the experts in this room, that while we want to promote technology, let us also look at the other side. What are we going to do with this huge population? Because definitely artificial intelligence, if we are not careful, will definitely take over the jobs that these young people will be taking on. And this is why I speak from the point of being a legislator, that we need not wait for the train to reach its destination. We actually have to direct this train. And that is why we need policy and regulation at this point. Otherwise, if we wait for the train to reach its destination, I can assure you, by the time we wake up to have regulation, it may be too late. Look at what is happening today. People are lazy. Everything Siri. Tell me about this. People no longer want, even those days, we would walk, drive, look, but now you on your phone, you simply, place a destination and directs you, turn left, turn right. But if you go back to where you turned left, turn right, you may not even know the close that you actually moved to. So let us, AI is good, but it will be disruptive. And that's why the policies and the necessary laws are necessary to guide our people as we develop this. I was telling one of the people here, the other day I was flying to, I think I was going to, I don't know where I was flying to, I can't remember, but I was watching a film and some people are developing wives. You can imagine, Uganda has a population of 51% of female. Now you want to start developing wives to help you in the house cook when we are there. We need to regulate this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think those are the only questions we can take because of time. And I'll start with Bobina as we move on to Zara.
So, okay. Yeah. I'll respond to the question that came from, sorry if I didn't get your name, but on the question on my questioning of this AI for D narrative, I don't think, because your question, frames my position as a pushback or as if it's a call to deprioritize from moving in that direction. But I wouldn't say that is so much so what I was pushing towards. My critique on the narrative is to bring us closer to the realities of what it is we're talking about and to just get into the nitty-gritties of it, and as relates to policy, more directly to policy making on the continent. And I thought we'd get to this at some point with Zara, but we didn't. I had wanted to mention that the effect of not, unpacking what this means for us more granularly is that we then find this cognitive dissonance in our policy making where we espouse ideals like inclusion or that we want to support our innovators and that kind of thing, but that we're not able to do it because from the very foundational aspects of our integration of AI and in terms of how policy is supporting it, that we have, prioritized the markets as opposed to the people. And it isn't, when we talk about an enabling environment within policy making, it isn't a problem to prioritize. I mean, the markets should, of course, be given the space to thrive, but that if they are placed, several times over in terms of importance, on top of what's in it for the people of the continent, then I think for me that's the argument that I was making. I don't know if I address your question on it. It's not so much so to deprioritize, but I think the problem there as well is, and I think a lot of people have brought it up, is the evidence gap that we have. That, for instance, you talked about that, a lot of the entry point of this has been these opportunities across a number of sectors, which is very true. But also, I think if we're to do some, I don't think we have robust studies that show on the broadly across the African landscape, the technologies that we have right now that are being deployed across different sectors. If a lot of what we have is actually serving, I know we have this sectoral AI in agriculture, in health, etc. But my argument is, to me, it seems that this consumer tech, that Gen AI, is more of what we have right now, and that we don't see a lot of. And again, I was tying the conversation to the tech transfer conversation, that if we still see a global monopoly on the very critical technologies that we have, and those are not trickling down to Africa, then there is a power conversation to be had as Africa in the global policy landscape, that we can't move away from the geopolitical and power conversation, because ultimately, whatever policies are being shaped are not so much so to the broader benefit of the people on the continent, but to just select groups of people, because certain communities, it could be, even the developer communities, for instance, I think are already a good example here. We don't see, I think it's very interesting to see how the people, the techies, complain about how they see more money, for instance, flowing to the policy circles. That's already very telling, because if innovation is not being supported, then and to what end are we seeing the money flows that are going towards certain areas? So my conversation is not to detract from the AI4D, but it is to question this broader, AI4D conversation, but also noting that, as I finalize that, I think for me it's also in just bringing the realities of tech today, that a lot is seeping in here on the continent, right? As we're seeing, because tech enables this circumventing of national boundaries and laws and etc. And there is a lot that is seeping in on the continent, and we don't seem to have that power conversation and the driving of our broader agenda for the good of the people, the broader good of, the broad African population who are outside the policy making circles or the designers and etc. I hope they're responsible, but I'm also happy to have this conversation with you outside this. And also lastly, maybe is in how we see that very AI divides that we talk about, in fact, being entrenched by the policy making that we have right now. That, for instance, I'll give an example of, we're talking about Kenya law. What a majority of the young Kenyans, who are involved in the AI landscape doing, we're seeing a repeating of this creation of these backroads where we're servicing the global tech industry, and it's not so much so meaningful work that these people are involved in. And so my point again, as I finalize, is really to be critical of how are we integrating these technologies and how are they serving the people? Because if it is not meaningful work, if we end up seeing, the creation or the repeating of these cycles of extraction that we've long lived through as a continent, then we sort of delude ourselves to think that we're making some progress, when in the global hierarchy, we are reinforcing the very same patterns that we're trying to step away from. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobina. I want to respond to a few things that were raised. One, someone raised a concern about community involvement, especially in most of these processes. And as you note, quite often Africa is usually on the receiving end. We do not have really Afri-centric big tech companies or innovators. But from our experience, we know that the different players are coming up with different kinds of innovation to do quite a number of things. At least I've interacted with legal tech AI applications that are people making, tailored probably to a particular country and also to respond to particular things. So for us, from a civil society angle, we are doing a lot, as they mentioned, capacity building, training. You can see we are going as far as trying to help CSOs to ensure that they deploy or use AI in an ethical manner, a manner that reflects the needs of the people. And of course, we also acknowledge, for example, that AI is shaping, not in a good way, but shaping tech-facilitated gender-based violence in a particular way. I know I talked about deep fakes, but especially on our side of the ladies, there's a lot of tech-facilitated gender violence against them using AI. But also, Africa continues to be affected, and this is also something we are picking up to discuss, the impact of AI, especially the deployment of AI and the impact on climate and climate change or the environment. Even as you're seated there, even if you think for you can depend on AI or you're not contributing to environmental degradation, the moment you generate some content using AI, know that you're contributing to environmental degradation. So the more you use it, the more a criminal you are in as far as environmental crime is concerned. You generate content, it involves a lot of usage of water, the wear and tear of machines, electronic waste disposal comes into play, maintenance of machines comes into play, and also carbon credits. If you know about carbon credits, they say AI machines do a lot of emission in comparison even to, 100 flights combined together carrying people. So it is a big, big, big challenge. And we are alive to those facts. And we're trying as much as possible to see how we can better the situation. My sister, she said her brother from APC mentioned about a language for Africans. Yeah, we have this particular challenge, but also springs from the fact that we do not have specifically tailored big innovators or science and developers of AI. Sometimes we have to try as much as possible to see how we can align within what has been provided. But it's not an end. As time progresses, things will get better. Before I forget, the Honorable Member of Parliament from Uganda who said is spearheading a law on AI. So we'll be more than glad to receive a copy and provide serious. We didn't. I wasn't even aware, but we need to get that. And maybe to Honorable Sarah Penn, it's not just wives that they're making to replace the work in the house. They're actually making husbands and wives, AI girl, AI boy, AI husband, AI woman, to take on the roles that would have otherwise been performed. So that means even the institution of marriage is at stake. It means people will no longer need physical boyfriends or physical girlfriends. All you have to do is to buy an AI boyfriend or AI girlfriend and stay with them till death do you part. I don't know who will die of the two, but that is what is going to happen. In terms of ethical standards for safe and ethical use of AI, this is what we're trying to do for CSOs. And that's why I said we are trying to develop a model policy with Thomson routers, and this will be rolled out. But also Africa is in the struggle. We have an AI strategy, which is there, and countries across the continent are trying to come up with AI strategies and policies, and we are quite positive that with the integration of most of these policies and strategies, we will come up with some good ethical standards. But in short, our campaign is that AI, as they said, is not bad, but because the risks and challenges it poses, then it must be used responsibly. It must be used ethically within the professional standards that have been set in those laws and policies that we see across the continent. Yeah, and I think that is it, but we can pick some lessons from Europe. They have, someone mentioned that we should not pick a law and use it here. But we can pick the law, we can benchmark. The parliamentarians, you know what benchmarking is. We can benchmark and pick the good practices from those laws and say we can employ them or deploy them on our content to make sure that even in the application of AI, we do so, but minimizing the risks, the challenges, and the dangers it poses. We have to find ways of purging most of those risks and challenges and dangers that it poses for Africa or for the African people. I thank you.
I would like to thank everybody for their questions, and I think that there's a common theme amongst all the questions that were raised today. I'd like to say that with the research that I do specifically, I always take an AI ethics approach and consider the responsible use of AI in all sectors. I truly believe that AI at the moment is not regulated enough, especially on the African continent. It is currently exacerbating existing inequalities, and issues of colonialism are being repeated through the production of AI as well as the use of it. It's being developed in the global north by big tech companies for a very specific end user, and oftentimes the end user is not African. And I think that from the design, development, and deployment of AI, regulatory practices and frameworks need to be put in place to ensure that those who are vulnerable are not being further oppressed, and that power dynamics are not being repeated. I think Bobina referred to the geopolitics of AI, and I think that essentially what we are being exposed to in this present time is the repetition of colonial practices of AI, as well as in terms of extraction and just the reproduction of oppression. And I think that we need to really consider those who are most vulnerable in our communities and in our societies. And those are oftentimes women and children. And if we continue to use and implement AI in the ways that we are going to put them further at stake and widen the inequality gap. And I think that it's crucial that we consider the role of the youth in the development of policies and regulation. As we mentioned in multiple discussions, they make up the largest population of the African continent. We need to be including them in the discourse and dialogue in the development of policies and regulatory practices that can be implemented to protect them as well as other marginalized groups. I think I'll end there as my esteemed panelists have touched on everything else. But yes, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Bobina, Adrian, and Zara, for that, and to the participants for the very interesting questions and also call to action. I mean, we will be here, not in this country, maybe in a different country, for next year, 5th Africa. And we need to see action from these discussions. I'm happy to hear that Uganda is coming up with a bill. Speaking on behalf of all the experts, I'm sure they'll be available to assist and to give their comments. And we are also aware about the African Commission resolutions coming up, 620, 630, 631. So there's a lot going on, and maybe the next 5th Africa, we need to take account of what has happened 1 year since this panel today and see what improvements have we made and what do we need to do next. Thank you so much to everyone for attending this panel session. Kindly allow the participants and panelists to move to the lunch section. Please do engage with them for the next parts of the day. I'm sure they'll be here for the rest of the conference. Engage with them, ask more questions. We look forward to engaging further during the lunch breaks. Thank you. Oh, a round of applause, please.